Welcome to another philosophical conversation. I'm here today with author and philosopher Pae Veo, also co-founder of the Stygian Society. And we're here today to talk primarily about one of his fiction novels, The Pèrelin Decline. Fantastic book. And not only the story, but I think the philosophy that is throughout the book, and just some inspiration for the relationship, I think, between fiction writing and philosophy. So Pae, so happy to have you here. And my first question to you is, what is fiction?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. It's good to be here. And what is fiction? Well, that's a simple question. Is pretty loaded, but I don't even which approach to take on that. Well, for me anyway. I guess it's a way to mirror certain ideas that might not necessarily be able to one may be able to express in any other way, but through a very kind of an explanation of experience at its core, I guess. But and by explanation, I mean the whatever the reader essentially is able to experience and have a connection with, that essentially comes out what is we describe as fiction. If that makes any sense. Oftentimes you hear the term fiction being equated with something that is false or untrue, but it's actually something that should be equated with something that is very true. In fact, oftentimes more true than what an empirical understanding of the world around us can offer. So
yeah, that's a great place to start, because I think that when we do, I guess, in common sense, think about fiction, we think about it as the opposite of truth. But I think, the feeling I was getting when I was reading your work, and also the feeling I get when I'm currently teaching the course on Lacan, I get this idea that actually truth depends on fiction. And actually truth is in some sense enhanced by fiction. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with that. I think it is a kind of relationship that can go both ways, and oftentimes does. It is kind of dependent on each other in such a way. I mean, if it's, oh man, how would I explain this, or how to say this? I guess it's the fiction's dependence on, or sorry, the truth's dependence on fiction is it's due to just this reliance on us not being able to describe exactly what truth is. I think there's been a very good reason on why so many existential authors ended up turning to fiction, writing fiction, finding inspiration in the works of Dostoevsky and Kafka and the likes, is because they're presenting something that simply can't be written down in an aspect of reality, or at least human existence, that can't be put down just by simple or not simple, but any kind of analytical method or whatnot. And so so the interpretation of truth and how we perceive it would have no choice but to be described through fiction.
I mean, what's coming to my mind is a question inspired by your background, which I know is both in the worlds of fiction, but also in the worlds of philosophy. I mean, you've written fiction and philosophy. And actually, strangely enough, when I was first sort of becoming an intellectual or just getting involved in academia, I actually started by writing a fiction book, which I hope no one ever reads. And I'm definitely never going to publish. but I started exploring fiction, and extremely different, at least in my limited experience, to compare writing fiction and philosophy. But I'd be interested to know, when you're writing fiction versus writing philosophy, are you in a different headspace? Are you inspired by different, what's going on in these two worlds, these two different styles?
Yeah, actually, that's actually kind of I'm not really. It's almost the same kind of headspace in both writing fiction and philosophy. I think the primary reason I write or read or study philosophy these days is typically to provide a background for the fiction that I am currently writing, and so they kind of have always just gone together. I can't separate one from the other. I couldn't write a work of fiction without on the side also writing a nonfiction philosophical statement in regards to the work at the same time. And I'm not really sure how I would go about even doing that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm just thinking now about my process, and maybe I need to explore fiction more in a personal way, just meaning I need to explore writing fiction more, or I need to take a deeper look on whether or not my philosophical writing process is similar or not to writing something like a story. Also thinking about that in the context of what you were saying about the difference between existentialist philosophers getting inspired by fiction, and analytic philosophers tending towards, let's say, non-narrative based forms of knowledge and ideation. When, considering a work like, for example, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, which is seen as a great philosophical work, but is also just a fiction, just a story.
Yeah.
And maybe why aren't there more works like that, or why aren't there more works that blur the line between philosophy and fiction?
Oh, that would be an interesting paper to write. Like I said, since they go so hand in hand with me, I wouldn't know where to begin without it. I think a lot of I mean, depending on what fiction you're reading, a lot of modern novels seem to have dropped a lot of these aspects that previous authors, such as someone like Kafka or who else, would have had just automatically, like this. It's kind of it was and kind of don't want to say a priori kind of understanding of these things before going into writing the novel, but usually I don't see how something like a specific philosophy doesn't stand out first and foremost before writing any work of fiction. It would be difficult to understand, I find, any kind of structure to one's story or idea without it. So the reason on why that a lot of this at least can't be seen. I mean, really, I mean, you could take I don't know, the Harry Potter and write huge, and I'm sure people have written huge philosophical tomes just from that. Whether it was intended or not, and this is something I was just recently talking to Daniel about when it comes to whether or not a work of fiction, on a spectrum, where does it sit on with philosophical ideas, really comes up to not the author but the reader, and you have that kind of death of author approach, and so. I guess if it's not presented as much in fiction these days, then well, you could say, well, that's the fault of the reader, but really, I mean, at the end of the day, we both know that what is meant by that question, and really, I guess I would just say I really don't know where or how people could put together these stories, and maybe that's this part of the reason why you're seeing this decline in arguably seeing this decline in the quality of fiction that's being produced, at least by the mass majority of, you know, you go Chapters or these big chains, and maybe that's part of the reason for that, you know.
It is, I always have trouble sort of determining whether there's an objective decline of fiction or not, or if the good fiction is moving elsewhere. Like my sort of gauge for this is like when I compare, for example, let's say, like, let me give an example from mass media. Like if you consider the writing and the story development of the first Jurassic Park versus the writing and the story development of the later Jurassic Parks, it's just like, where did the story go? I know the original Jurassic Park is actually based on a novel by Michael Crichton, but it's just sort of
Yes,
like,
yeah.
there's this tendency for movies to go in this direction of the story, the characters just disappearing and becoming almost like, I even forget the characters. Like there is no character development.
No. Actually, the second Jurassic Park was also written by Michael Crichton, and well, it's I think, well, you bring up a few things here that well, movies, especially these high budget films, are far less interested in storyline and character development as much as they are explosions and the monetary aspect that they can rake in. And so there's that problem, but you're seeing that a lot in all of art. You mentioned if the quote unquote higher quality works of fiction are just going elsewhere to be published. I think you're seeing this a lot in most forms of art. I mean, you see this in music. I mean, nobody really that's truly interested in music is wants to be a musician or anything. It's paying too much attention to the top 40. They go to the smaller independent kind of record labels and listen to where real music is still being recorded and produced and put forward. I mean, of course, this is all very subjective, but it's a common theme that you hear spoken about regardless in circles, and I think literature is the same way. It's a lot of people are starting to kind of give up on traditional publishing and going, and you're going to see more and more of that until it's just they're going to blend into being the same thing, and where traditional publishing is either just going to disappear or become like more like the competitors, which would be, you know, Amazon. Really, it's or doing what Holly and I are doing with staging, and I was gonna say something else on that. There's oh, I forgot what I was gonna say.
It'll come back as soon as we move topic.
Yeah, probably.
So if it does come back, do bring it up.
Yeah.
But I this was sort of like really an opening to the Pèrelin decline, which is I highly recommend people picking up. But I'm actually going to start talking about this book with the opening. I'd like to know a little bit about who this book was dedicated to. You say, for a friend and comrade, Dr. Howard Hopkins, while supposedly taking notes, and this is sort of the connection between fiction and philosophy, I think, leading into, while supposedly taking notes in your introduction to existential philosophy all those years ago, I wrote this little novel. Please consider this the final assignment. So this was inspired by existential philosophy, which makes a lot of sense. And you know, who is Dr. Howard Hopkins, I guess, and his relation to the book?
Yeah, well, he's a very private person, so I'm not sure how much he'd want, but no, he was a professor friend of mine that had helped me out Oh, this goes back many years. My early years, I was an ex train hopper where I just travel around, and after I stopped doing that, I ended up starting to stay outside this university, and I would just walk into the university, and I met this Professor Howard Hopkins, who I ended up taking multiple courses with overall, and then kind of got things kind of straightened out from there. And he kind of just became a very good friend of mine. And as I was getting the degrees in English with minor in history, my main thing that I was actually taking throughout, I was at university for nearly a decade, and I just by taking just philosophy courses with Dr. Howard, and so yeah, he just even to this day. Of course, I no longer live in Calgary, but we still call, and I'll be visiting Calgary in October, where we'll visit. And yeah, he's just kind of just been a very good friend. And this novel was written, well, exactly what it says during those courses. I was drinking pretty heavily at this time, so I was completely wasted out of my mind, sitting there in class, couldn't take notes. So instead of taking notes, I thought I'd just write this novel that was that progressed, because it was a history. It was an introductory course to existentialism, and so we, of course, starting with Kierkegaard, we're going through the ideas, and we ended on Sartre, so I just took whatever ideas were going there and followed it through with the protagonist in this novel as I was going through it. And so so yeah, that dedication is quite literal.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And another interesting thing is the preface before you start the book, where I think you introduce like a fundamental paradox to existential philosophy, and actually I've been thinking about it a lot since I read the book a few weeks ago, which is this paradox between, and the way you introduce it also is very interesting, and also after reading the book I feel like it has a new meaning also. But this paradox between these two, let's say, axioms or tropes of philosophy. One is change is the only constant, Heraclitus. And then another one is nothing is new under the sun. Yes. And then you say, you end the preface saying, impossibly, both of these statements are true, and no one questions either. And so I've just been racking my head on this for the last few weeks. What were you doing there?
Well, it's like I wrote this preface as taking Hegel's advice to do it, of course, after once the book was finished being written, and whether it had anything important to say that the book didn't, I don't know, but so yeah, that was written while I think I was probably reading. I think it was the first time I read the Greater Logic, and so my mind was, of course, just on these kind of contradictory elements, this kind of sublation of history, just this, and so this progression, and I thought, well, okay, well that even though when I had first written this novel all those years ago, it kind of reflected something that I thought was kind of interesting in this idea of not necessarily providing, as far as the character in the novel trying to find the meaning behind these rocks goes, not necessarily trying to find meaning that had occurred through a historical event, to trying to replace and emulate that exactly, but to take it to have that kind of nothing new under the sun idea, but also move it forward without getting rid of it. And but of course the ending kind of the novel would kind of show that this idea of getting rid of these things, but really there's nothing being getting rid of. It's nothing actually changes. It's the same thing while still moving forward. So that, I guess yeah, that's kind of trying to show that the preface is written in a completely different voice, because it was written about 10 years after the novel was written. But I think it worked well, and as you said, it does give, it gives what I was really trying to get with at the end of the novel. I think it actually is just stated there with those two axioms going. I think is correct.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that it was inspired or written at the time you first read the Greater Logic, because that's actually what I found myself returning to this morning. I was searching through the Signs of Logic for the moments where Hegel was mentioning Heraclitus and the principle of becoming and the total concept of becoming, and also I was looking for alternative meanings to some of these axioms, like, for example, apparently nothing new under the sun is sort of equivalent to this idea that everything is an echo of the past. And I feel like that was also something that was throughout the book as well. It's specific, we'll get to the rocks and stuff like that, but specifically in regards to the main character with the rocks and her being tied to this past, and everything is just an echo of this past. And
yeah. That's a great way to put it too, because that's exactly what I tried to explore, what it would be like for someone to be completely removed from any kind of history whatsoever, and just in a more very strict Heideggerians, that just being thrown into, but with the consciousness of an adult realizing exactly what is going on, and therefore it's when we view the past, we make these decisions in regard to in respect to that. But if that is not there, the echo of them still remains, which is why she has all these elements around her, that those are the echoes or the shadows on a cave wall that just won't go away. But there is also no connection. So trying to make sense out of that, and what it would be like for a human being to be just completely, or if it's even possible to be completely removed from the past, even despite having no memory of it whatsoever.
It's especially interesting the way you're describing it, that thought experiment of what would it mean to be completely removed from history, to completely be thrown. And that's sort of a very powerful image that we get right from the beginning in the writing, with, let's say, the main character's name Simone. But before going into that story specifically, just want to say, on a personal level, I've always been interested with fiction authors. What is the relationship between you as a writer and the main character Simone, in the sense of it's I would imagine it's something quite intimate to write from inside someone, to create a whole person, and to write from inside that person. So what's your relationship basically to the main character Simone?
Yeah, as stated, it was written while going in this class, in which I was learning a lot of these. So even though I had studied them earlier in my life, you got getting far more deeper into these ideas was I thought kind of this character that was also exploring them at the same time, and but without even realizing that these are established ideas and that have been fully developed throughout history. But imagine, without knowing any of that, discovering it for the first time, not by looking into it, but by asking questions to it as being an unknown. And so that's kind of what I was doing in this course. And so I was kind of trying to express that emotion and just embodied it in that character. So the character is kind of just my poking around these ideas in the dark, really, and I didn't know another way to express that. But she's very childlike and very for obvious reasons, just not really having any idea what's going on around her, but that's just kind of how it felt. So it's just kind of those feelings while sitting in that class, personified.
So I guess now we can go like with how you initially start the book, and it, I mean, it starts right off the bat with this. I think the origin of the book is sort of a metaphor for the book as a whole, with this central theme of amnesia, memory loss. Simone wakes up seemingly in a well, she starts in a cafe. She's no longer in the hospital, but you know she's in some sense suffering from amnesia, and all she knows basically is when she was born and where her apartment is. And I think more importantly, in regards to this amnesia and memory, it's sort of this, you know, what is my searching for this origin? What is my origins? And I need to know my origin in order to know the way forward, to know my way into the future. So it's like this going into the past. What is my origin in order to sort of know where I'm going forward? And this is in some sense a very disorienting, confusing space to be. Almost like you're developing a theory of memory or a theory of history here. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I there was a chapter before this that I had actually taken out, because which was her in the hospital, kind of like, yeah, and things, so some things were kind of explained, and I thought I took that out just in order to further that point of this would make a lot more sense if they're now in a completely unfamiliar setting as well as, and I didn't want any kind of explanation except the things that you are originally told at birth. You're pretty much given these things that are told about you, and then you kind of go from there. And of course, when you're born, you can't process any of this. It's you kind of do it as going through the stages of life. But when you're absent from those stages of life and already kind of in this position, and then is it really any different than having any clue and waking up in the hospital? And it's it blurs these lines between what we could possibly claim about ourselves, even if it is given to us at birth, and what it would be if we discovered it 20 years later. It's what is it that is actually attributing these truths to ourselves? Is it simply just that past or history, or is it just something we just do? It's and is there any difference? I mean, of course, there's certain truths that either biological or whatnot, that what might be attributed, but outside of that, as far as who one is as existing in the world, that really doesn't ever change.
It's like trying to think about well, first say, I didn't hypothesize that about the book, that were you purposefully leaving out chapters that provided deeper explanation? Because I got the sense throughout the book, like there were these purposefully placed missing pieces. Like,
Yeah,
to me that there's a missing chapter of the hospital, because I'm like, wait, did I miss the hospital chapter? I was like literally thinking that.
There is a lot that is purposely just not there. But then there is the parts that I did decide to take out later. Yeah, so both of those are correct.
Yeah, no, it was something I experienced a few times. I was like, it was this weird experience of like absence with a shape to it, like where I felt like, wait, I almost like I'm seeing an absence here. Like I just did Pae purposely leave that out. I bet that happened a few times, but I know you've said that when you're reading an author's work, perhaps specifically fiction, but maybe all genres, is that you're only reading a little bit about what the author actually wrote. Is how much was left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, with this book?
How much did I take out?
How much did you remove?
Well, the first chapter I took out. Then there were a lot of things in which I had started while writing, and then just completely deleted. Didn't realize that, well, that doesn't really work. That doesn't really. But then it didn't really. The good thing about the like, as you were saying, that these things, that this emptiness that kind of takes form, the good thing about that while writing something like that is that I could really do whatever I wanted here, and I could just attribute this to just, well, that's just part of that form that you're seeing. But I did have a whole background for this, and there is actually a reason behind the rocks themselves. I just don't mention it. I kind of do at a part there, but it's very, very vague and purposeful, and it's something that the character herself, just completely misses, and I assume most people that read it are going to not pick it up either. But a lot of, and I think that's where you get that kind of understanding of the form, because there is actually, it is telling a lot more, and sometimes, of course, as there's no, you often do tell a lot more by not telling anything at all, and so it's so I did, yeah, I can't remember too much exactly how much I purposely, consciously took out, but it was quite a bit. I would have to, from what I can remember.
It's the notes you don't play, right? And
Yeah.
it's like what you leave out. But it makes sense that there's a background here, and I would probably have to read it again to maybe pinpoint some of the spots where that was particularly evident to me. But so anyway, we've got this very weird situation. Simone, who's total memory loss, remembers nothing about her history, and then only knows about her apartment, basically. And then when she goes to her apartment, basically she's got an apartment filled with rocks, and what do these, this mystery of what do these rocks represent about my past? Are they clues to my past? And she develops various different theories about what these rocks might represent. The idea that I be interested to know, what you were trying to do there. Of course, you say you never really stated explicitly in the book itself, but the line from existentialist philosophy that came to my mind while I was reading was actually Kierkegaard's well-known axiom: life can only be understood backwards, but you must live it forwards. And so these rocks are sort of this, she's just staring at this past which has no obvious meaning. She's trying to understand it, but in the process she can't really live forward.
Yeah, and yeah, that axiom of Kierkegaard is exactly one of the things that I had in mind while writing this. This is when we were studying Kierkegaard. We read these passages and having conversations with Howard. That quote came up, and I remember it standing out. Being, well, that's. But I see it everywhere now, but this was back before Facebook only read quotes of people and then equated that to their whole body of work. But before that, that really did stand out and was very interesting. And then, of course, what's funny about the, oh geez, why is my mind, the coffee is not kicking in properly. I keep forgetting what I'm about to say. I just dropped it, but I guess my main point was, yeah,
these Facebook quotes get pulled out of context, but
yeah, I kind of started going on that instead of going where I was actually about the quote on Kierkegaard. Now I can't remember, but it is very.
Well,
Sorry.
in the context of the book as a whole, I think you start to, at least that was sort of my takeaway from the book, is that, you know, what these rocks are is kind of her being held back by the past, and consequently needs to let them go in order to live forward. Like, you know, she's looking for the direction of her life. She's looking for the meaning of her life so that she can live, but that this is kind of a futile endeavor.
Yeah, and having to trying to have this past in which she now, as far as she's concerned, has no connection with whatsoever, but still desperately needs it to define who she is and what she should be doing. When in her reality, these things are at that moment completely irrelevant. They have nothing. There is no clear connection. They're just there. And so to look behind yourself in order to define what you are at that moment, that isn't all that's going to be needed. And it's of course she doesn't understand, you know, you kind of do need that to understand exactly where you're going to be going, but at the same time it's not necessary. I guess that's part of the point.
Right. I mean, I was coming up with hypotheses while I was reading the book as well. My first contact with the rocks, and sort of her state of curiosity and just confusion about the rocks, was that, like, it's kind of this, and something you bring up also throughout the book, is this idea of purpose, and contrasting the idea of purpose with rocks as kind of the exact opposite of purpose, like this just mechanical objects which are falling according to laws of gravity. If you just drop a rock out a window, just fall. It's just that, or it's just there, with no purpose.
Yeah.
That the rock is kind of like this, like, brutal confrontation with the indifference of the world, the meaninglessness of the world, the purposelessness of the world. It's almost like the greatest joke ever, that she's looking for purpose in rocks.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying. I when I first kind of had this idea, but it wasn't rocks. There were no rocks to begin with. There was just nothing. But then I came across this old story that I had written, and I wanted to see how long I could write. This is something just completely separate. I just wanted to see how long I could write, like, an actual story with a structure on a rock, but just not a rock that has any special quality, just you know, just really nothing. And then it was just kind of an interesting little practice, and I came across that story. I thought, oh well, what if I just kind of take that and put that, because that is exactly what you just expressed. It's a kind of joke. It's nothing, and then at the same time it is Earth, you know, it is the world that is just that you are going to have to abstract some kind of meaning from one way or another, and that's kind of what we do in the first place. Is it's just that this rock is far bigger.
No, it's absolutely this representation of the plight of the modern man, and perhaps existentialist philosophy, is that you've got to, what you just said, abstract meaning from one way or another, from this rock, and in her case these rocks. And one thing that came up in the book that made me think along these lines was this question that you had: at what point does a boulder, or what point does a rock become art? You know, at what point is there a transition between a rock and art, and this relationship with the subject?
Yeah, and there's at different times in the novel, these different kind of representations of what a rock is kind of show up, and of course the one being a painting. And it's like, well, well, and then of course there's the boulder, and just trying to approach this from the very basic kind of phenomenological kind of thing in itself. Well, what is that, and is it any different from is this what is the difference between this boulder and the rock she has in her apartment? But at what point it kind of goes back to kind of those Zeno's paradoxes, you know, the heap of sand. At what point do you start taking one away? At what point is it no longer? Well, this is what classifies that boulder as the boulder, and those rocks wouldn't be classified as that, even though they're in the same substance, same. There's nothing that distinguishes them other than size. But if that's all the case, then how are you going to describe what this thing is apart from the other thing? And yet she would still say that she has thousands of rocks, when really she could also just say she has one that's broken up. And and so she's trying to grab, well, what do I do with that information now? Is there meaning there, or is this anything at all, or should this just continue ignoring that thought ever showed up in my head? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a few connections there in terms of this transition from quantity to a new quality, or you know, adding or subtracting a quantity to a new quality. Like I think in the Signs of Logic, for example, Hegel gives the example about when does the head of hair become baldness, or something. Something similar along those lines. But it's also interesting to think about rocks and purpose, because rocks are often seen as, because they're often seen as mindless, again, just objects, sort of following the laws of gravitation, with no will or with no purpose of their own, and her trying, and then her just on this search, trying to look for some direction, trying to look for some meaning, and the rock sort of metaphorically holding her back like a weight of gravity or something like that, and this idea of letting them go in the end being kind of like the opening to freedom. It's like also this almost like this metaphysical tension that modern subjects feel between, let's say, the scientific universe, materialist physicalism, and freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and and that's the is this when she lets this go, the question can only be something that of metaphysics, and that because she didn't see these rocks as anything in the first place. So letting go, it made just as much sense as not. This was not something that had any purpose or meaning, and therefore the only way it could was to realize exactly that. And so getting rid of the rocks or not getting rid of the rocks actually equated to the same thing. It was just now it was allowed to now be open for interpretation, and it'll be open for the possibility of providing oneself with meaning and purpose.
Do you think that's a good way to think about being a modern subject, in that sense, that it's just sort of a perspectival shift on the same situation?
Do I personally think this?
Or maybe more in relationship to this, is the story trying to point towards that?
Yeah. I mean, I tried to not lose sight of what I was trying to do, and that was trying to express these existential concepts, just as I was perceiving them and hearing them as I was going, and present them in how I understood them at the time, and so. And yeah, I mean, personally, I think that there's definitely the truth to that. It's you know, the very, of course, famous axiom of Sartre's from humanism is an or existentialism is a humanism, essence or existence precedes essence. But it's what has to happen in order for that to even begin. Is this presupposes something that needs to be recognized before you could actually even begin with Sartre's axiom. And so but and then what that is, or at least what I try to show in that is that realization that these are one and the same kind of things, that this is going to have to happen internally and then expressed outwardly and vice versa. It's I guess if that makes sense. I don't.
Yeah, no, I think that did come up in regards to external and internal motivation throughout or at a certain key moment of the book, in regards to, there is no external essence which she's going to find, which is going to give her the inner motivation to then define her purpose. If that makes sense. Like, I think there was towards the end of the book where this distinction between the external and the internal is looking for basically an inwardness, an inner motivation, basically an existence which preceded the essence of the rocks.
Yeah. No, that's yeah, that's right. That is what I guess I was getting at, and that there's not too much more to that than really that, because that's the where it ends. It's kind of where it's supposed to take off. That's where the average novel will take off after all of this, I guess. And by average, I mean one that follows the normal structure, the storyline that has purpose, meaning all of this has to happen first.
Right. So does that mean we're going to get a part 2?
Oh, it's funny because I thought of that the other day. I think there could be. I am, for some reason, for no reason at all. I don't know why. I just don't. I don't like it. I just like to leave things the way it is at that moment. If I ever felt that the need to, I would. And it's funny because I did think of that the other day, and I don't remember what the idea was, but I thought that would actually be a pretty good idea to follow with this one. I'll have to think of that again. I can't remember what it was I thought, but I did think of a sequel for this just the other day. But
I guess it depends if you have more to explore with that character. If you want to get inside that character, if there's a story there that hasn't been told with her specifically.
Yeah, well, it's funny because the journal in the novel kind of has these clues about what's going on, but it's never actually even quite clear whether that's her journal or not. She even makes that's the statement near the end. These books could have just been there when I moved in, and everything here was actually somebody else's doing, relating back to the historical moment. It's like, this may have had nothing to do with me in the first place. And it's just a coincidence now that I'm here, and this journal may not have anything to do with who I am, and I might not even, like, she never writes anything except for a few numbers or whatnot in the books. She just doesn't even really know if she wrote it. But I mean, there's the connection with the Kennedys that doesn't make any sense whatsoever from her perspective. So.
Well, we should maybe talk about that then, because she finds we'll get into some other peculiarities of the story, but she finds herself in this apartment with these rocks. She doesn't know her connection to them, but there's also these 3 books, which are also curious. And also, that's another place with these 3 books where I repeatedly encountered these absences with a shape. Like, I wondered if there was a background or a story about these, and I'm even like now like feeling like, if I ask just directly, what do these books represent, is that the right way to approach it? But basically, there's these 3 books. Like, there's the list of American presidents, a book of history of presidents, a traveler's guide, and a journal. And all throughout my mind, I was always trying to play with this triad of why these 3 books, maybe similar to what Simone was thinking.
Yeah, they're uh it's strange because I don't remember completely what I was thinking. I remember wanting to have three books that would kind of represent what one could possibly be given, uh um almost um innately after being thrown into, or so there's a history, a personal history that is completely unknown, and then there is, of course, the travels guide. It's like, well, here's the map, figure it out. And that's really all we really have. So they really represent really what you are given, kind of just existing in the world, but just then in here they're a bit more concrete and refined, but overall that's what they would really just represent.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way she goes about trying to connect the stones in these three books, and basically, trying to say, did these stones come from my travels? Did these stones come from different states in the United States? Is it that I think there were two main hypotheses, like, am I a great traveler? Uh, are people going to recognize me on the street as a great traveler, or or are these people I know sending me rocks from here, there, and everywhere else?
Yeah, and that's kind of what is this I was thinking, this idea of, like, how when we'll say we have a favorite sports team or something, and they play, and we say, well, we win, and we won. It's like, well, no, you didn't do that. We do the same thing with people throughout history. When we talk about our a culture or something, well, that's us that did it. Even though so when she's just thinking, am I a great traveler? Am I this? It's like, well, what do you mean by that? Do you mean you individually did all these things, or are you actually a great traveler in the sense of what are you willing to define as your history? Is this and on what scale are we talking about here? Because the answer to this is both a yes and no, no matter what way you look at it. So it's so I think that's what I was doing there, but whether she personally did it or not, it actually becomes irrelevant. It's well, you did, at the end of the day. I mean, if that's the language one's going to use.
Mm. And that it just reminds me of the way she starts relating to her memory, in the sense of she started to fill up. She seems like she started to imagine a history which was in some sense the collective history of humanity, or just she started reflecting, well, this isn't even my, I'm remembering all of these figures that are before I was born.
Mm-hmm.
It was more like the species history, or something like that, than her personal history.
Yeah, and there a lot of the events that she's writing about in the journal. They're usually these kind of revolutionary events that in which you'd see this turn in history that kind of you would then, of course, look back on, and can only look back on after this is completed, and so she has all of these little events just lined up right there, and then it's like, well, how does this fit in with what I am doing at this very moment? It's how do you evaluate that, especially when all you're given is these mundane kind of stones to work with.
Again, quite comical.
Yeah, it is. It's supposed to be kind of funny. It's supposed to
There's
be.
irony throughout the book.
Yeah, it's definitely like I said, I was drinking pretty heavily when writing it, and there might be moments where that shows up. I don't know.
Right. I mean, connected to these books, and trying to piece together a history. Um, to me, one of the most interesting paradoxes that came up in it, and here I was reflecting on it also with my own personal history, and a change in my own personal history and relationship to the past, is that I thought it was fascinating the way in which the more she learned, namely the more she accumulated facts and knowledge and so forth, the more she became confused, the more things didn't make sense, the less she knew what she wanted to do going forward. So just this paradox of the more you know about the past is not necessarily helpful in regards to what I do going forward.
Yeah, yeah. I read this really interesting kind of thing the other day. I don't remember where I read it, but it kind of goes along with this. That when you tear a hole in a net, is there more or less holes in the net? That's kind of when I read that, I thought of this, and that's kind of what's happening is the more information that you get, is just going to be, and really it comes down to its utility and the ways in which one might use these things, on whether it's going to fill in the blanks or completely blur the lines even more. But yeah, that's it's at least maybe I'm just speaking personally here as well, but maybe just the way I kind of see how moving through life is, it just doesn't really make any sense.
Well, it's actually, to me, what I was thinking about when I was going through this was kind of the relationship to the way we think about personal history and psychoanalysis, which is, in psychoanalysis, it's not really that you're trying to like piece together one coherent narrative or something like that about your entire history. It's more that you're trying to stumble upon like one signifier, or trying to stumble upon one event which you're kind of recollecting in the present, and which kind of snaps things into place. But it's not necessarily, again, more information. It's not about quantity of information. It's about like a specific thing that shifts you, like
Right.
yeah. So it's not really about quantity. It's more something about something that clicks into place. Like, and in order to find that thing that clicks into place, you've kind of got to stumble around a lot in a like obscure sort of fragmented memory.
Yeah, yeah.
And I feel like that kind of happened to her. I started to think about that as the book was ending, like where, something seemed to click, where she was like, basically, I saw her, she was like, I'm just going to confront nothing. And well, that's funny for another reason we'll get to, but
Yeah.
but like, I'm just going to confront nothing, and the emotions that come up with nothing, and the existential dimension of freedom and how terrifying that is, and I'm gonna take that on.
Yeah, and she comes to this conclusion because every time something in which she thinks she has that breakthrough, and which is something you see happen all the time. You think, you think, well, every time that shift, as you say, she thinks that happens, there's something immediately happens that shifts it back, and it is just, it's this, but yet still going forward, and yeah, at the end of the day, it's the one moment is kind of that facing this inevitable kind of nothing, I guess.
Well, that brings us to an irony and joke of the book, I think, with her dog. I mean,
Yeah.
so her dog's named Nothing. I also had a question about how she got the dog. I'm assuming her neighbor brought the dog over or something. We're not really told. Again, it's another one of these well-placed absences where someone knocks on her door and brings her a dog.
Yeah.
And assumes, okay, well, this dog's mine. The dog seems to know me and stuff. But my before going into the dog, and the funny name of the dog is, why didn't she ask around? Why didn't she ask the neighbor, like what's going on here? Like, she seems like it's almost like a dream, like it's like the whole thing's kind of like a dream. I feel like she never really talks to anyone else, or not that much.
Yeah, a huge reason for that is just simply because then I wouldn't have a story to write. I just have someone tell her everything that happens. So I couldn't really do that. But uh, I can't even, yeah, she has a neighbor
I
drop
was just
off
ask
the
the neighbor,
dog.
ask the neighbor.
Yeah, I tried. I could I can't remember if this was something I took out or had or I left it in, but for some reason the neighbor didn't speak the same language. I remember originally writing that, but I think I might have taken that out.
Had
And
some
so,
like
so
Spanish in it.
yeah, yeah, and I think and the person that delivers her mail, I think I took that out too, but also couldn't communicate because the place in which she lives, Leosha, is it's a very touristy kind of place, and so you would have these kind of languages going all over the place, and it would probably, I could imagine, not, I mean, of course, it's in being in France, it's primarily French, but being the historical place it is, it wouldn't be unlikely that she'd be familiar with, and she does end up realizing something she's forgotten, that she could in fact speak English. So
Yeah.
so there was a lot more, I think, that I took out that dealt with language, but I just didn't really have a way to put that or to show that in any kind of way that would move the story in the direction I was going. So I might have taken a lot of that out.
I definitely got that feeling throughout the book as well, that there was some background with language, English and French maybe in particular, which was some background information or strategically left out. But I think we could say is an incredibly, to me, I was thinking always, well, you could say it's a Hegelian book, or you could say it's maybe it's even a Sartrean book in regards to she's this being which is struck by amnesia, and the only partner she has throughout the entire book is a dog named Nothing. So you just
Yeah.
have you have this odd couple of being and nothing throughout the book. I'm not sure if you wanted to go into the philosophy of what's going on there, but I thought this was
Yeah.
beautifully done.
That really was just there for because the well, the dog, when the dog shows up, there's always an instance whenever those shifts occur that you mentioned, or whether they help her understand her past or not. Whenever they do occur, the dog is always there. Nothing is always right there, very well aware of the situation, it seems. For example, when she's traveling down the alleys and with that brick, the dog knows all of this already, but there's this miscommunication, like she can't get the information from the dog. It's so really the name, of course, it's one of those very obvious kind of play on words, but it serves its purpose. I think despite it being one of these obvious symbols, it still it comes up at the right times in which you can make multiple connections of this. And so the dog is the thing that in which she's always referring back to, that knows what is happening but can't quite get to it, despite it being by her side this whole time.
Yeah, it's actually sometimes a little frustrating that you do feel like the dog knows, like you do, or that the dog's leading her, or the dog is the dog. I mean, she makes references oftentimes to how much experience like the dog must have been
Yeah.
places, and so there's this like this total breakdown of obviously communication, but there's this sense of knowing.
Yeah, yeah, and oh, I was gonna say, I actually, what was funny too about this is just kind of a side, a historical one. I read this somewhere. I don't know if this is true or not, but after I had finished writing this, I had read somewhere that Sartre actually did have a cat named Nothing, which was kind of interesting. I read that, so I don't know if that's true or not, but
I always
I
think of
ended up.
Derrida with the cat. I always think of Derrida staring at the cat's gaze, and Derrida wondering
Yeah,
about the gaze of the cat. But I didn't know that about Sartre.
yeah, that's I read that somewhere. Again, I'm not sure if that's true or not, but if so, it works very well with this. But yeah, the connection to this being and nothing, this the where whatever her consciousness might rest, or wherever it might be, it is always within, side by side with, it's always in communication, or at least known by this dog Nothing.
It's really a beautiful representation of the odd couple, uh, the odd couple and the logic of their interaction. I also thought it was really interesting the way in which you play with the unconscious, because I mean, there's a lot of references to dreams, memory. The unconscious, I think, is throughout. And one thing in particular you say is, well, the character wonders, how is it? She says, how is it that the brain knows something that you don't know? Like
Yeah,
I guess, I mean, we could phrase this in different ways, but it's basically like this idea of an unknown known.
yeah.
This
It's
of the
sorry.
unknown. I just like thinking this dimension of the unknown known, and how this is playing in the story.
Yeah, it's well, it's I don't know how to explain it any better. That it's that statement. How do you know something you don't know? It's whether that's true or not. Because as Sartre, of course, wasn't on board with the whole unconscious. Or yeah, the that Freudian unconsciousness, and it really does appear to be a contradiction, but nonetheless, it's like, well, let's say you what it is you then do know is not the thing that you don't know, but the fact that you don't know that you don't know, which is a completely separate thing than that thing in which you don't know. It it's kind of but then there's also those things that you don't realize you know what you know. Like if someone were to say there's more than 50 people living in Australia. Well, you've always known that, but you've never consciously put yourself being aware of that. But you don't need to be. You just know that, even though you've never been conscious of that ever. You never thought to yourself, well, there's more people. No, you just know. But so in a way, you do know things in which you don't know.
Right. I mean, I think maybe this is a little. It's all, I think it's on topic, but for whatever reason, this is coming to my mind. There's this popular public intellectual, Yuval Noah Harari. Have you heard of him?
No.
He's a historian. It's not important. You don't need to know him, but his name anyway. His name's Yuval Noah Harari, and he was he's speculating about artificial intelligence, sort of knowing us better than we know ourselves, and that we're gonna, through algorithms and stuff like that, and that this is going to become more of a presence. But he was talking about it in relationship to himself, because he said he's a gay man who only came to accept he was a gay man later in life. But he said if he grew up with like AI smart glasses or something like that,
Mhm.
the AI smart glasses would have known before he knew that he was gay, because it would constantly pick up that he was checking out other guys. And so basically there's an unconscious knowledge, which is
Mhm.
attracted to men, which he doesn't, it's an unknown known. He doesn't know that he knows he's gay. You know, so
Uh,
that the way this is anyway, the way in which I'm thinking about the unknown knowns. But in the contrast to your story, we could come up with different examples.
yeah, well, that just got me thinking about the difference between that which is suppressed, and then that which is just simply unknown. Like those would be two the things we consider unknown or unconscious, things that are suppressed, because typically when the things that are suppressed, we ultimately say, well, I've always known this. It's almost you do quickly fall into a weird maybe not even weird, and just a regular, Cartesian dualism, in which you have to confront these things, and then you come to that conclusion. It's like, oh well, I actually did already always know this. But then does that still, I don't know. Think about that more.
Yeah, I mean, we could go down that rabbit hole. Sometimes repression is so radical that that it's not always that the consciousness is repressing. Like repression is devious in some sense, where you can not even know you're repressing.
Yeah.
So I'm just
You could not even know. Yeah.
You don't even know you're repressing. It's like but this, I don't know. Like, I would have to know more about why. I don't know enough about the main character's amnesia and what's causing it and what the accident is that caused her amnesia. But like, I do see like sort of the unconscious functioning as sort of where she gets these fleeting thoughts. Like sometimes they're just sentences, like the weather in Dallas thing.
Oh, so yeah.
Like they're basically just fragments of sentences that that will occur, or images of her mother or impressions of her father that apparently she knows, but she doesn't know.
Yeah, she even questions at some point if these memories that are flash are even her memories.
Yeah.
If there's something that was just planted in her head. Sometimes people will read something in a fiction novel that they relate to very much, and then they start relating more and more to that, to the point where some of their memories start to coincide with a fiction that they've been like a work of fiction that they've been reading, or maybe saw on television, and then they take that what they saw and act it as if this was an actual memory. I mean, these happen, especially with people that have amnesia, and they'll usually create false memories, and oftentimes they come from dreams as well, which is why the dream sequences in this tend to be the same occurring dream, except for the one in the middle, which is that Nietzsche kind of a turning point of the novel. So yeah, there's questions of whether, even if, because these aren't her memories, and then trying to connect it to these rocks is ultimately just going to be well, it's not going to amount to anything. But then of course the question arises is well, does that actually matter? If she never were to find out the reason for these rocks, then does it really matter if it's her memories or not? And would this actually define who she is any more than anything else that she makes up?
Yeah, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, going back to that Kierkegaard quote, living forward, if it is, these are things in which, or even sorry, these things that you're creating yourself as you go. Well, and there is no intrinsic meaning or reason to do so. Would it actually matter if you take the past and apply all that meaning and purpose as or any more than these things that you just make up as you go? Like, what defines these things as one being more meaningful or purposeful than the other? And of course, there's answers to this, or there's been writings on this, but that's the essential question she's asking in that is if my memory is just as real as any other person's memory, if I attribute that to myself, what would be the difference? Or what would be as far as meaning and purpose goes, and trying to apply that to one's life? neither of them exist out in the world. They're just they're memories. And so if I apply this to the rocks, say, and then I can build something from that, would that actually, and I never find out what the truth behind the rocks are, what differentiates between the truth of the rocks and me applying these false memories to them, is would there be a difference if at the end of the day it is never found out what the truth behind those really were?
Right. It's like I think this takes us back to the truth on the level of Plato and the Sophists, in terms of, is there truth behind the play of our own language? Is there truth behind the play of our own words and our own fictions and our own dramatizations? And are we thinking about truth as some external substance or some external essence that our words correlate to as a sort of one-to-one correspondence? Or is the truth something that's more in service of our freedom? Is
Yeah.
something more in service of something abyssal?
Yeah.
And being unhooked from the rock, so to speak, letting go of the rocks, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, so yeah, absolutely. It's Sartre has that you know, if you die as something, like as this idea that's held in everyone's mind of who you were, that is who you are. You can't really, whether it was true or not, if that is a shared common aspect attributed to you, you know, there's the whole, this is, you know, hell is other people. You're constantly in this conflict of trying to show yourself for who you are while the other person's doing the exact same thing. This can also be applied to yourself and how you're applying meaning to things in which, you know, but you're trying to define these other things around you, but it's you defining it, not those things in themselves. And so does it really matter at the end of the day what it is? Because you pass away, gone, it is whatever, what's left is well, that's all that there is, and that ends up being what that is.
Just a little bit of a head spinner.
Yeah, maybe.
I think for many people, they find this disorienting, or could find this disorienting, to think about this, to go all the way down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's I tried to present it as simple as possible. I've said in the past that this really is a children's book for existentialists, and I wanted to write it in a very in a style very similar to Camus, who would take these very simplistic small sentences. He stated he was trying to emulate kind of Hemingway in his writing style, but with these spurts of poetic prose. I thought, well, that's kind of I like that. So I tried to do something very similar in the style of Camus. Whether I did or not, I don't know, but that was the purpose. So the ideas themselves may not be that are underlining the story. May be a head spinner, but I think the novel sticks to that it really is kind of a kid's novel for existentialists.
No, I think that's absolutely true. I was just in terms of really unpacking that idea, it could be a head spinner, but the novel itself is
Yeah.
If you want to define it like that, that's cool. I mean, I was thinking while I was reading it that this would be a great intro book to have in an existentialist undergrad class. I mean, if I was teaching an undergrad class on existentialism, I think this book would be on the reading list. I think that.
Well, thank you. That's probably the best compliment I think I've gotten from it. So thank you. That was the goal. I mean, you know, you set aspirations high, and then you do what you can. I think that was the you know, had that in mind.
Yeah, there's a lot of themes in there that are just directly tied to existentialism, so why not? But I wanted to talk about some of the repeating dreams. Like one of the dreams, you tell me if this was one of the repeating dreams. The one I picked out was the theme of the symbol in the dream of the blood-soaked stones. What were some of the
Yeah.
what were
Uh,
some of the what was the dream that you had in mind as the repeating dream?
the idea of the stones, that is very, if there's that relates back to one's history, and no matter how you interpret the history, or this it's it's not going to be pleasant, whether you look at history as a whole in the back of of human history. And it's so that's really all that was. And then of course the Kennedy, the Kennedy assassination kind of stands as that pinnacle moment in US history, in which you see this turn in which these kind of things are being recognized, of this turn of power is not, the veil was kind of lifted, and then these so no matter how you're going to look at the history, it's going to be soaked in blood at the end of the day, whether that's metaphorical or literal. It's going to be both.
Yeah, I mean, personal and collective. And then that, this also, that's just a very vivid image, the idea, and also a very paradoxical image, of bleeding stones.
Yeah, yeah, it's yeah, so yeah, and then it's yeah, if you relate the stones to say one's history, that history then bleeds, and it's going to continue, and that's something that you're just never going to be able to wipe clean. It's never going to be just a stone ever again. And it can't be if you want to do anything with it. It's so there will be blood at the end of the day.
There will be blood. Another dream that was very powerful to me was the one where she, and also it's sort of a trope of dreams that I relate to, probably we can all relate to, is when she can almost see her inevitable death. There's this the stones are going to fall on her,
Mhm.
but her feet are stuck in mud. So like it's almost like you see an imminent death, but you can't move, and you're just staring.
Yeah,
And then of course usually you wake up or whatever when the death occurs.
this was something I'd almost taken out, but I needed it because that was that very kind of Nietzschean turn, kind of the death of God moment. In It's the shadows of the camels are walking beside her, and she's standing at the foot of that mountain, and then she almost sees the face of the lion, and then recognizes in herself that she has no choice but to be that child. Starting the chain there, she was put in a position which these chains aren't actually there. She has no choice but to create new chains to be broken repeatedly, and there is no escaping that, and then so she's stuck there and she can't move. Wagner's playing in the background, like it's again a very obvious kind of point. And then it's soon after she wakes up, and then it sees nothing in the corner, and that's the moment in which she realizes at that moment that it's giving her that stare, and that she is in fact becoming this thing in which she's been trying to battle this whole time. And then that ends the first part, and then and then the second part is really just that realization that yes, you're going to have to create these chains. I mean, by all means, still try and put the pieces of the puzzle together if one need be, but there's going to have to be something a bit more. You if and then that's kind of what that dream. So I couldn't really take that part out because it was kind of an integral part. I that was probably the one part that I had to go back and rewrite over and over again, and just the one part I'm just probably never going to be satisfied with. But
So it's a part that you still makes you feel a little like it doesn't fit, or that it wasn't expressed the way you wanted to express it.
I'm not sure what my problem with that part is. I don't know if it's just uh I made it too obvious, and it's just like at that point you kind of just go, yeah, okay, I get what's going on here, or not, or maybe I just feel that way. I don't know. I don't know what my problem with that part is, but I couldn't get rid of it, and I couldn't rewrite it the way I wanted it. I was just like, I at one point I was just like, well, that's what it's going to be, I guess, and I don't know another way to put that.
But the connection to Nietzsche, I did assume when I started seeing the symbols of the lion and stuff like that, I felt like there was the direct reference there, but that was your intent.
Yeah, that was definitely my intent. I think it was important to have that as since these such ideas follow throughout existentialism from there on out. You can't read existential thought and have a full grasp of it until Nietzsche comes along. So after that moment, Nietzsche's kind of there, kind of worming his way throughout the rest of the novel. There's always that presence.
In terms of existentialist philosophy like Camus, Nietzsche, Sartre, are there any existentialists closer to our present day that you feel like exert a power on your work, or existentialist fiction in general?
Oh, by modern, like living today.
Or just after, let's say, the post World War II era?
Yeah, well, there's a lot that I wouldn't consider existential, but regardless of whether one considers them existentialists or not, are no doubt very influential on the existentialists. Of course, the first one that always comes to mind is, of course, Heidegger, who I wouldn't consider an existentialist, but if you're he's not an existentialist, but if you're going to write an introduction to existentialism, it would be difficult to leave him out. Sure. Despite him, I think it's quite clear these separations that the letter he had written in response to existentialism is humanism, and his comments on this alone, I think. Well, I mean, what are you going to argue the Heidegger himself on his own thought? But I mean, of course, sometimes people are certain can be certain ideas can be applied somewhere else that were unintended. But also who I don't think gets enough. Well, in circles you and I are involved in, probably is a well-known name, but isn't as well known as, say, that a Heidegger or Sartre is Gadamer, who's his contribution to the hermeneutics, I think, is second to none. But after Gadamer, there's of course those that I'll read, but I never really it's not something that I'll pick up ever. Like there's the few that there's not hasn't been a day in which it will go by in which I don't find something of theirs. After Gadamer, there's really that's about as modern as I'd go as far as influence is concerned. Of course, again, I'm not really sure who I would place as saying, well, this is an existentialist. I mean, you could say someone like Marcus Gabriel, for example, who wrote this neo-existentialism, which is a good, fantastic little book, which isn't just him. And but I don't know if I would place him with that. But again, he's quite clearly been heavily influenced by the post-war existentialists, and there's people like that yeah, I guess you could say it has influenced me, but
I was just wondering if there was any other strong influence in the background that might be interesting to check out. But I think you've mentioned Camus, Sartre, and Nietzsche as pretty strong themes in this work specifically.
Yeah. Try to there was so much. I think I was trying to just jam into it with what I was reading at the time. I know I was reading Jaspers pretty heavily at that time.
Oh yeah.
So there's I was probably around this time just getting into Husserl and Brentano, but so and I think when she discovers the boulder in the storage space, that you could almost tell exactly when I started reading or was picking up Servia. That was clearly when she starts questioning, the thing in itself. That's so Husserl does kind of make a bit of an appearance there, but that's
Yeah, it's interesting for me to know what's floating around in the background there. I think another thing that stuck out to me in regards to the main character and the search for her identity was this feeling, and I thought it was quite relatable to, is this feeling of needing someone to tell her who she was, or wanting someone to tell her who she was, or not being able to identify herself without another. And I mean, the other, in terms of other human being, is again a curious absence in the narrative development of the book as a whole, in the sense that she'll go on a walk and she's hoping someone will notice her. Maybe she's famous, maybe someone, maybe her mother's coming, maybe after 3 days she was like, oh, I've lost hope that my mother is coming. Probably she's not coming. But just that our identity is, in some sense, for many people, identity is guaranteed by the other.
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
you get the ability because the other, like, oh, my mother's here, so now I know who I am.
Yeah.
Or the person down the street said, hey, Simone. So and so forth. So this way in which the I is entangled with the other. What was going through your mind with this theme?
Yeah, well, that is the underlying theme. The mother figure and kind of had the representation of kind of a godlike idea. This person that will be coming back. They have to come back. They're the person that gave birth to all of this in the first place. Therefore, if nobody on the street can possibly tell her who she is, she always has that mother figure that she knows has set this all out for her. She definitely has a purpose, a reason, and it was given to her by her mother. But near the end, she had to accept that maybe her mother's not coming back, and maybe she passed away, and then she just doesn't know about it. And it's so there's this death of the mother, of course, but the death of the mother is also that understanding of that the death of the always reliable other. You always have at the end of that day that other that you can say has provided this identity, but that actually might not be the case. And so she has to grapple with that. And of course, that's, I don't get too deep into that. That's kind of where it ends off. But as I did that would be where really existentialism does leave off, and while at the same way it begins, the ending is identical to the beginning, in the sense in which you have to accept that yeah, but so that she ultimately ends up creating these ideas of her being this explorer. She creating yourself as that other, repeatedly, to relate back to self as this thing that you're trying to create. So whoever it is that you do create yourself to be, or give yourself meaning, it's going to have to be through this act of creating and recreating yourself as constantly being the other that is embodied in yourself, if there is nothing else.
Yeah, it's something I think most people struggle with immensely, and for me, in terms of, let's say, creating the person that I am now, I think it certainly involved key moments of separation with the family, with my high school friends. I still remember the moment where I had to cut off my high school friends in a sense, because I was just like, I'm not going to be able to, in some sense, define myself afresh in this relationship. And there is sort of a confrontation with a terrifying freedom in that dimension. But this is also something that she seems to be going through a little bit with the father, but much more so with the mother.
Yeah, yeah, and there were a few reasons why I did that.
I kind of get the sense that the father, maybe there are parts that, is that true, that maybe there's parts with the father that were left out because he only very briefly appears.
Yeah, well, it's funny how that worked out too, because it I didn't really have any reason to introduce that. I thought the mother would suffice, and I was, well, that is a clear representation, and that, but I didn't. There was just really nothing. Like, there was nothing I could. I thought I couldn't just leave it at nothing, because obviously she would have to. Someone that is in her position would have to. That question would arise, but there's really nothing I could say on it, so I just was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do with that one.
It seems like at that moment of the father, she just starts pure hallucination of the ideal father, like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
he was educated, he was very charismatic,
yeah.
starts to say, like, yeah, am I just fooling myself at this moment?
Yeah, it's yeah, the father figure and its representation, that ideal kind of, you look at as an ideal. And I guess I probably just didn't know enough of what that would, of the psychology behind that, to really incorporate that in any meaningful sense at the time. So I probably just kind of hinted at it, and then just, now let that go, and see what comes of it. But that was probably about it when it came to that.
I mean, I think connected to that, with this search for the stable, reliable other, um, in regards to her sense of self-identity. To me, I feel like that's the part of your work, pointing towards it, explicitly towards the end, where she just starts to recognize that she's in this impossible loop, or this impossible repetition with the origin, and starting to question. I found it to be really one of the most moving parts of the book, or one of the most profound parts of the book, towards the end, where she just starts to, where the whole search for the origin just starts to be questioned as such.
Yeah, and then yeah, there's that obvious kind of Sisyphean moment, which came about by accident. It seems like such an obvious point of the novel, when she's rolling that boulder to her part. But it didn't actually, that wasn't on purpose. I kind of just came about it, and I thought, well, that's gonna just have to be an obvious thing that shows up. But
It's on the book jacket that she's a Sisyphean hero.
yeah, and so I kind of, well, especially after that moment in which that happens, I was like, well, that's, I'm just going to say, was on purpose, because it just fits in very well. And the original point, that moment wasn't supposed to come until she started to remove the rocks from the apartment, going up and down the stairs of her. And that was the original moment in which Sisyphus was gonna make that appearance. But then it just so happened it came in a bit earlier. But yeah, and so then I ended up just having her throw the rocks out the window, which kind of ended up representing its own thing as well. And I was just kind of almost getting kind of, then near the end, it's, it just kept feeding, looping back, and every single time that you think, okay, this is going to progress from here, and then it just doesn't. It just goes right back to the beginning. of course you get that kind of Sisyphean repetition over and over, to the point where it's like I could really only go on with that for so long before I realized, I gotta end this. She's gonna have to eventually, and I knew how it was gonna end. I just didn't really know how I was gonna get there. But then until I realized it doesn't really matter. Hey, sorry.
I think that's it's. I was gonna ask that. Yeah. Did you know what the end was before you started writing?
Yeah, I did know it was gonna end with this, that the realization that she came to, but I didn't know how I was gonna get there.
Funny.
But but yeah, I did know that, simply due to this kind of the purpose, really, the original idea started with that existential axiom of creating yourself as you go. That coming to that realization was the original kind of the acorn of the idea there. So I knew how it was going to end, but I just didn't know how I was going to get there. I kind of just started writing during class, and whatever I heard in class, I was like, oh, that's an interesting idea. How can I work that in here, and whatnot.
And on that point of sort of knowing that what the end was, I mean, I take one of the points I interpreted as at the end is basically this message of a dangerous commitment to freedom, or that freedom entails a dangerous commitment. And it's sort of not looking for the, and you also have this interesting idea that everything that's not poetry or metaphor is just rocks.
Yeah.
Like everything that's not poetry and metaphor are just rocks. And that's just like, so I get this image in my head of like, don't look to the past of the dead stones, and don't hold on to the past of the dead stones, but sort of live poetically as possible, with a certain dangerous commitment to an abyssal freedom.
Yes. Yeah, that's I don't, I'd be hesitant to even add anything to that. That's exactly what what I was getting at there, which is yeah, the exact way it ends, shaking in an open cage. It's that imagery, that everything else is just rocks.
Right. And in terms of your influences from existential philosophy, the Camus, the Sartres, the Nietzsche's, do you feel like there's although there, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of the general theme of existentialist philosophy is against sort of like abstract universals, but is there a certain common horizon that comes out of existentialist philosophy, you think, which points in this direction?
Yeah, well,
It could also be no, but I just was wondering if you've interpreted that, or
well,
if you
I never really thought about it, but I guess there almost would have to be, even if it's that negating element itself. It's that so the common element would just be simply this this oh well, I say condemned to be free, but this would entail then that if that is the case, then that one universal would be, well, you're not free to not be free. That's and therefore you have really no choice but to have a choice, and then that would be applied to everyone in that sense. I guess I'd have to think more on that, but I think that would be at least true.
Well, I think that's an interesting paradox to think on for a moment, because I do think that a lot of people I'll say my uncle's coming to my mind. He's been with the same partner since he was a teenager, and I was remembering I was questioning them about the concept of marriage and the way they thought about it. And his response was basically, I love my cage.
Hmm.
So it's just this idea of I want to be in the cage. I don't want to open the cage and be in an abyssal freedom.
Yeah. See, well, sorry to say, well, that's you exercising your freedom to its fullest. If that is because then you're in the constant position of making that choice to remain in such a position. So it's just it's no matter what you do, no matter what cage you put yourself in, it is within the cage of freedom.
You're free to put yourself in that cage.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I guess the only cage you can possibly not escape from is that cage of freedom.
Mm.
I mean, that would be a Sartrean answer anyway.
Mm. And so then this idea of you're not free to not be free, and there's no choice but to make a choice. Do you feel like that's sort of the place the existentialists ultimately finds themselves?
I Yeah, I mean, more or less. For the I would make that argument. I think it's the kind of fundamental starting point for existential thought. And then if one disagrees, Sartre say, well, I guess you're free to do so. I mean, you kind of end up in that circle no matter what way you want to do it. Sartre wins if he loses. It's
Very weird circle.
yeah, it is. It is. I find Hegel is in a similar kind of circle in which this if it turns out that it's all wrong, then that just further shows that it is right.
Right.
It's weird how that works, but somehow it does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's sort of a misrepresentation of the narrative of modern philosophy to sort of juxtapose Hegelian philosophy against existentialism. I more see Hegelian. I mean, I know Hegel's fundamentally his philosophy, at least as far as I can tell, is about freedom.
Mhm.
And so in that sense opens up the door to the forms of existentialism that immediately come out after Hegel. But I mean, we don't need to necessarily go down that road. I mean, my first question along these lines, though, is what does it mean in some sense to juxtapose the existentialist philosophy notion of freedom, which is confronting you with absurdity, with danger, with terror, even. And even I think there's a great part in the book where you talk about freedom being, you have to confront fear. It's on the other side of fear. You can't let fear control you and bind you, and things like that, with the way I think most people think about freedom, which is usually more pleasure oriented and in relationship to, say, sense certainty.
Yeah, I would take Sartre's position on that, but with Nietzsche in the sense that when not putting yourself in that position of confronting that terrifying aspect that you're set and any kind of and I think it is absolutely true that when people will relate freedom to that more to this idea of orientating oneself toward a more the more not necessarily hedonistic, but those as this positive thing, but it has that negative aspect is what actually really needs to be confronted to to discover, well, who you are, and anything apart from that would be because this act of kind of living in bad faith. If these distractions, if you use your freedom to ignore the fact that you're free. This would be doing anything just for the sake of doing anything, which would of course be that notion of living in bad faith, and therefore you'd have to take it along with that Nietzschean kind of wherever that danger is, go confront it, because on the other side of that is who you are, and that's so I'd that's how I would take it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think Zizek makes a joke about neoliberal freedom being sort of like the choice between Pepsi and Coke. Like where it's like that this is the freedom that most people are thinking, and that's precisely the unfreedom.
Yeah, that's
that would be the unfreedom. That would be using your freedom to ignore the fact that you're free.
Yes, exactly. That's I would agree with that.
I mean, then in terms of the way Nietzsche keeps popping up in the book is that I think in that towards the end you say, well, she decides to start over, and there's a really great line at the end of the book where she says, "I'm going to start over with nothing except nothing," meaning that she's just her and the dog, nothing.
Yeah.
Let's start with nothing and have nothing by my side.
Yeah. That's
and emphasizing this, that the self is a self-starting wheel.
Yeah.
Sort of, I interpreted that to be sort of like the Nietzschean child had emerged at the end of the at the end of the work.
Yeah, and that's exactly that nothing with nothing. That's that kind of, the dog represent what he does is that thing in which it is what it is not, and so you end up having this nothing with nothing. It's but yeah, that's exactly what was going on there.
Right. So in terms of the book as a whole, what would you encourage for readers of the book to be paying attention to, or what is the maybe and if there is an overall message, what's one of the overall messages you would hope someone takes away from the book? Or have we covered it?
Kind of throughout. It's I mean, it's well, like any work of fiction, it is a telling of an aspect of history or an interpretation of a part of history, and this is just really the history of the development of existential thought. It was the way I had interpreted it at the moment in which I was being given it, and that's its primary focus is that. I'm not saying at any point in the novel that these views or these ideas are what I personally abide with, or that it's what people should take up. It's just presenting that history of ideas. As subjectively, objectively subjective as possible. That's and then that was really the overall goal, I guess.
I guess then the final thing I wanted to ask in terms of the book as such, what does it mean to be a Sisyphean hero in contrast to like previous notions of the hero? And do you see that's sort of what we are, or where we are? Is that how you relate to yourself as a character?
This I think this act of rebellion and going against something in which is in which we're either told this is what it is or not. It's very innate in human beings. I think a very common characteristic is this act of rebellion to almost push that stone up, knowing the or yeah, like accepting that at the end of the day it's going to roll back down, but giving it the middle finger anyway and saying I'm going to do it anyway is you know, the interesting thing about that's Sisyphean character that I rarely hear or if ever hear people mention is when Camus states one must imagine Sisyphus happy. He's not saying that Sisyphus is happy. So is it enough to imagine happiness? Is that enough as it is to actually have it? And is that where that rebellious kind of act of saying no to annihilation is it just simply enough to imagine such a case? Well, I don't know. I guess that will depend on one individual to another. This reminds me of the other quote of when you wake up in the morning, you have two questions: do I kill myself or make a cup of coffee? Well, just how long? It depends on how good the coffee is, I guess. It's like, but
It was literally there was a coffee store in Vienna I always went to, which had that quote on their coffee machine.
it's a great quote. I like it, but it's yeah, I guess it depends from one individual to the next, and it just how long is that coffee going to be worth making? Well, it's I don't know if I guess it is what it is, but you know, I mean that's how I see it, I guess. I don't know if that really answers the question too much, but yeah, I think this I think it's this act of rebellion in the face of what life is given one, and what it ultimately amounts to is worth exploring.
Seems like it brings us to this contradiction of freedom and the rock.
Yeah.
It leaves me with, that's what I'm left with. Like the image that I'm leaving in my head is this relationship between, like we have the rock. You could say the rock is the earth. We have imminent conditions of possibility for freedom, and what does that mean? And how do I live a life best suited to what repetition is worthy of freedom, or something like that.
What repetitions are these? Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great way to word that. And yeah, I would agree with that completely. I don't know. You'll say something, and Daniel does this too quite often. They'll say that it's like, I don't know what to add to that. If I add anything to it, it's gonna degrade what was just said.
We'll leave it there. We'll leave it there then. I guess with final thoughts, I know that you've just released the Stygian anthology. I can leave also links in the description to whatever else it is you're working on. Is there anything that you would encourage people to check out in your work, and what you're working on?
Yeah, well, currently I've well, this last little bit I've been working on a piece for the contribute to Philosophy Portals anthology, which has been great because it involves the science fiction, which I'm currently
super excited to read that.
Yeah, well, I hope well, and the idea really came from certain things that you stated, which I've always been thought about but never had a real way to express until you said something that really clicked, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna use that to fill this out. So and I'm currently editing a science fiction novel that I had written many years ago. So it kind of coincides pretty well. And so that's what I'm working on now. This is Stygian. We are going to be Stygian is going to be in Calgary in October. We're going to be doing some readings around Canada. So if anyone's in that area, could always come check it out. But that's pretty much what I'm focusing on now. And hopefully I'll be back doing videos on this platform. I guess in October. So all that's going to come. I've been doing having discussions, going through some earlier Sartre's essays with Davoud. So that's been really good, and we're going to be posting all that. So it's and I'm in the middle of a move, so it's been busy with projects and personal things. So I guess that kind of answers that question, what to look out for. I guess that's some things that I'm putting out, I guess, anyway.
Well, I'll leave links to your Amazon page, the book we just discussed, The Pèrelin Decline, highly recommend. The Stygian Society, as well as your YouTube channel. And if you're interested in checking out Pae's work, like I said, I highly recommend it. And if you have a chance to, if you happen to be in the Calgary area, apparently you have a chance to connect physically. So that'd be great. So thanks for being here, Pae. Is that maybe just a final thought for the viewers?
Thank you. This is been great. I rarely I think it's the first time I actually really ever discussed the novel. So it's
Weird, eh?
It's been it was really great. I was afraid that I would have nothing to say about it, but
did you have well, we'd have to maybe talk in the future about whether having a conversation about it changed your perspective on it, but I'd be interested to know sometime in the future.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's so thank you. It's I'm glad I got to do this.
All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, everyone, and have a great evening.